everybody, welcome back to the Recovery Channel. We are continuing today on our series of interviews, and today we have Kristy with us. She will be talking about her journey through the 12 steps of ACA. ACA stands for Adult Children of Alcoholics. ACA also, though, talks about and addresses issues with any kind of dysfunctional upbringing. So, I know this is a channel and a series on addiction, but codependency is an addiction, and we'll get more into that as we talk to Kristy through these questions in this interview. One thing I do have to say is that with any official 12-step program, they have the 12 traditions, not to be mistaken with the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, the 6th tradition of which is: an ACA group ought never endorse, finance, or lend the ACA name to any related facility or outside enterprise, lest problems of money, property, and prestige divert us from our primary purpose. What that means is that we are not getting paid by ACA. We are not endorsing ACA in any way. We are just expressing our opinions about that program and talking to somebody who's been through those 12 steps. So I had to say that because, like, ACAs, do they have lawyers or anything? I don't know. Anyway, we don't want to take any chances. So with that, let's jump into the interview with Kristy. So Kristy, one of the traits of an adult child is codependency. A lot of people have heard the term codependency, but they don't really know what that means. So could you describe what you would consider codependency in your own words?
Sure. There may actually be different definitions for this, but for me, it is best described as people-pleasing. This means I constantly look outside myself for love, acceptance, and validation that I'm valuable rather than providing that from within. I used to do anything to stay in people's good graces, and often at my own expense. It looked like this. I overextended myself. Then I got caught in a cycle of resentment because I wasn't really getting what I needed or validated from them. And so I just perpetuated this really bad cycle for me.
So as I mentioned, this is a program about addiction, and some folks are probably wondering why we're talking to somebody who is a codependent. So could you describe the similarities between addiction and codependency?
In my opinion, addiction and codependency are two sides of the same coin. We are each an addict and a codependent. However, one side of the coin will be more obvious in how we act. For me as a codependent, I get emotionally intoxicated. This is sort of like being drunk, but it's based on my emotions like fear or excitement or pain. And my system releases chemicals that give me a hit and keep me in a hypervigilant or frenetic state emotionally. But the codependency is about trying to please people versus acting out in an external addiction.
So ACA is about alcoholics and family dysfunction. How does it deal with codependency? Wouldn't something like Coda or Al-Anon be more appropriate for somebody with codependency?
I don't think it's really about appropriateness as much as it is about what fits best for the person. If someone's living with a loved one who struggles with alcoholism, then Al-Anon may be the best program for them because there are others in the group facing the exact same situation. For me, ACA was a good fit because my family trauma and the program's ability to help me process my family's dysfunction. Yes, I am a child of an alcoholic, but I also suffered from extreme abuse. When I read the laundry list, which is the 14 characteristics of an adult child, I think I identified with like 13 of the 14 items on the list. It was like somebody had a view into my life and really understood everything I was going through. So that program fit the best for me.
Are there 12-step meetings for ACA?
Yes, absolutely. They modify the 12 steps language to best identify with what the adult child faces, but it's essentially the same concepts as AA or other programs like it.
So we talked a lot about powerlessness in the first few weeks of our program. What does powerlessness look like to an ACA?
This was actually really tricky for me. I had to first understand that powerless does not mean helplessness. This honestly took me a while to grasp since I was helpless and powerless as a child in my family dysfunction. I really struggled with the word powerless for quite a long time, to be honest with you. My journey has brought me to a place of understanding that I was powerless over the alcohol abuse and the dysfunction of my family. That those effects of my crazy childhood were not my fault, and I gradually learned to trust my own feelings and perception. I learned to stop giving away my power to others in my people-pleasing attempts and feeling helpless to change my behaviors and choices. But this did not happen instantly in step one, mind you. This took me a long, long time as I worked the program for several years.
Do you think codependents have the same issues with denial as addicts?
I do, from the perspective that denial keeps us from seeing what is true. The difference for the adult child is that it's internal. I exhibit denial when I attempt to explain away the behavior of my family and its impact on me, or when I offer excuses for them or others in my life that aren't treating me well. Since many of us grew up in chaos and we continue to create this emotional chaos in our adult lives, we really don't know there's a different way or that we have different choices. We don't like it, I can promise you that, but we don't fully understand we have the ability to make different choices.
Do you catch yourself slipping back into denial sometimes?
I would say I struggle to stay sober. Once I come out of denial and I'm aware of something, I can never unknow it again. So from that sense, I can't slip back into denial. However, I can and do slip back into old behaviors that don't serve me well. For example, I might revert back into self-doubt, or I might feel like I'm emotionally shaking in my boots when I sense disapproval from others. Sometimes I notice it right away and I can course correct. Other times it takes me longer to realize it. The feelings of resentment and overwhelm are usually the key signals to me that I have slipped back into my old behaviors.
What kind of things do you ask your higher power for help with?
How long do we have? This can be a really long answer. Probably the most constant request I make is to teach me to be more like him and to know his true character. I say this because I grew up in a strict conservative religious home that behaved like hell behind closed doors, and I experienced a lot of heavy fundamentalist interpretations of the Bible and received mixed messages about God. I truly should have been a statistic, but I'm not because of my faith in him, kind of as distorted as it was. Since I've been in recovery, I have experienced a depth of love and compassion that has helped heal many of my wounds, but I daily ask him to help me to be more like him. I also ask him to help me trust myself by noticing my feelings and listening to my intuition along with his guidance. And the practice for me is not just an asking in the morning or at night before I go to bed, but being mindful of his presence with me all day.
How would you describe surrender?
You ask really hard questions.
That's what I do.
I've come to define surrender as my willingness to do whatever it takes to recover from people-pleasing and to find peace and serenity in my life. This means I had to give up the notion that I could fix others or control my circumstances. I've learned to accept that I can only control my thoughts, feelings, and actions. It also means I've had to break through the denial of my family's dysfunctions and the effects of the abuse in my adult life. Some of the dysfunction feels so hardwired in me, it is often challenging for me to spot that I'm being too hard on myself, or I'm demanding unrealistic things from myself. And so I have to just keep reminding myself that, I don't have to live this way anymore.
So personally, I had a hard time with the whole concept of surrender when I was first starting out on my 12-step journey. How would you advise people just starting out how to surrender? What are some practical things they can do?
Well, I think we honestly all struggle with this. I believe it's unique for each person. We all come from different walks of life, and the events in our lives have pretty much shaped the way we are today. I think the first question to ask ourselves is, am I willing to do whatever it takes? This takes us from a place of doing it in our own power or through our own mechanisms or behaviors and admitting we need help, either from our higher power, from a support group, but not doing it the way we have always done it. This sometimes takes the whole first year, but it's an important element of surrender. If the answer is yes, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, then I would encourage the person to ask themselves, what are the things that must be done? Is it going to weekly meetings? Is it actively working a 12-step program? Is it actively wrestling with the concepts and challenging your current beliefs? I realize this is a really practical answer, but I think surrender begins here. Through the course of each person's recovery, we come to an understanding of what it means to surrender to our higher power.
So our viewers are working hard on their 4th-step inventory right now, right, viewers? Working hard? Good. All right. So as a codependent, what were some of the areas of focus for your 4th-step inventory?
Well, over the years, I've learned that not all inventories are the same. Each program has their own emphasis, and thus the process is a little different. One isn't better than the other, mind you, they're just different. With that said, there are some common focus areas. So the first thing I would say is to focus on blameless and accountability. When we do the inventory, it's important not to blame ourselves as we revisit the pain of the past by our choices. But it is equally important not to blame our parents or others that have hurt us or maybe even abused us. The gift of the inventory is our openness and learning. We get a better understanding of how we do what we do if we stay open and curious. Holding ourselves accountable and others accountable is different than blaming. Another focus is to stay grounded in the present and avoid sinking into a victim mindset. There is power in naming the exact nature of our abandonment and shame. Another gift of the inventory is that we face the denial of our family dysfunction and focus on ourselves as we attune to our feelings.
What was your experience with the inventory?
I think roller coaster ride describes it best. I was actually terrified to do the inventory. I remember getting all hot and prickly feelings inside and when our leader first talked about step 4, and I absolutely dreaded it the first time. Ironically, I was afraid of all the amends I would have to make on the other side of it. Talk about jumping ahead. But as I started the work, volumes just poured out of me. We were encouraged not to work on our inventory more than 30 minutes at a time. Leader made a big emphasis about that. But I actually found that sometimes 60 minutes would pass without me even being aware. I did pace myself over several months. I think honestly it was probably about 4 months, but it was important to me that I do as thorough an inventory as possible. I was willing to do whatever it took to bring about my healing.
Did you learn anything about yourself?
What did I learn about myself? Well, probably the biggest thing was that I am overly responsible. I was shocked to see how much I took on that wasn't even mine to own. This was actually an incredibly freeing experience for me. I realized how much self-inflicted pain I was causing myself based on my people-pleasing. I also realized how I kept the insanity loop going by making poor choices in emotionally unavailable people. Everything just kept pointing back to my lack of self-love, grace, and value for myself. Pretty powerful learnings.
All right, folks, well, we're going to wrap it up there for today. Kristy will be back with us in future sessions to talk about her continuing journey through the 12 steps. As always, thank you so much for watching the Recovery Channel. Stay strong, stay sober, and we'll see you next week.